Quite a while ago, I believe it's almost been a year now, I had written an article around the subject of when does a company become so large and autonomous that it becomes a government unto itself? As in, no matter what kind of fines any other government applies, it is still able to flaunt an enormous amount of power, and no amount of legal recourse will change said company's behavior. This was exemplified recently in Europe when a multi-billion-dollar fine was applied. I believe it was to Google. And no amount of cajoling by lawmakers in the United States, Ted Cruz is one who has been threatening, not even just Ted Cruz, but even Elizabeth Warren, they've been throwing out, the antitrust threats and threatening to break these companies apart. And no amount of cajoling has done anything to change these companies' behavior. Maybe they'll change temporarily, then they'll go back to doing what they were doing before. Twitter has done this time and time again. As an example, shadow banning someone, they get caught, they fix the problem, then they go back to doing it later on. And I wanted to ask another question that is kind of supplemental to the article I had written. When does a domestic company no longer become a domestic company? Not even just a multinational company, but when does it become a company that is in service to another government? Now, this may sound like a contradiction to the article I had written, but I don't believe it is. Because even a company can become, not a company, a country can become a vassal to another country. Take, for example, the role of Romania during the Second World War and its relationship with Germany, and then after Germany, the Soviet Union. Or you could take Lithuania, first in service to the Soviet Union. Germany invades, it becomes a vassal of Germany. Soviet Union invades again, becomes a vassal of the Soviet Union. And this happens all the time with governments too. So again, even super powerful companies can become indebted and in service to another. And I don't want to become the China-hating show. I don't want to do that. It's just that, organizations like the NBA and companies like Blizzard have been, the actions by these companies have been so blatant that I believe it has completely pulled the mask off, that these companies are they're not domestic, and I'm speaking in terms of American companies right now. So if any of you have any examples of, say, in Great Britain, if you have an example like that, or in Germany or wherever, you can let me know. But I'm speaking in terms of the United States and the news that erupted over the NBA with the general manager of, I believe the team's the Houston Rockets. Forgive me, I actually don't watch sports all that often. But because it's ostensibly a U.S. organization, I do care about the subject matter, even if I don't watch sports myself. But him tweeting out support for the freedom of the people of Hong Kong, and then, again, there's no proof for it, but I believe that he was, and I think everyone else believes he was pressured into deleting that tweet. And then, I think it was the NBA Commissioner Silverman is going over to Shanghai to, he says that he's for free speech in the NBA, and no one believes it for a second, and he's going over to grovel for forgiveness so that they can get back into the Chinese market and ingratiate themselves with the communist powers that be over there. We all know that's the case. And then later on, LeBron James, the famous basketball player, he goes on to criticize the Houston Rockets general manager. I believe that's the team name. Excuse me if I have that wrong. He goes on to criticize him and saying things like, it could hurt people financially, which pretty much just said it all, that it's all about money. And there was another case. I do play video games occasionally. I don't really play video games like StarCraft or World of Warcraft or any other Blizzard games. I did play StarCraft when it came out. I think that was all the way back in 1998. I did play the first StarCraft, but then my sci-fi interest took a different turn, but that's a whole other story. When one of their, one of their competitive gamers for, I don't remember which, I don't recall what the game was, but one of their competitive gamers during a live broadcast he had voiced his support for for Hong Kong. And I believe he is originally from Hong Kong, moved to Taiwan. I think that's the case, but when he had made the statements, he was in Taiwan. Anyway, he had voiced his support for the freedom of Hong Kong and the protesters there. The video game company Blizzard, banned him from competing for, I believe, a 12-month period, so a 1-year period, took away his prize money from the event, which was about $10,000, so it's not a small amount. Especially in Taiwan, where the per capita income, it's not super low, but it's lower than it is in the United States. So it was a great deal of money. And then they had issued a press release in China essentially saying that they support, I believe it was something along the lines of defend the pride of our country, as in China. And that just says it all right there, our country. So I was asking the question, when is a company no longer a domestic one, and when is it in service to a foreign power? And in the case of Blizzard, it's pretty darn obvious. They are a foreign company. They are no longer a domestic American company. Whatever they were in the past, they're not that anymore. And also the NBA, the quote-unquote National Basketball Association. They're no longer that nation is no longer the United States. They might still be the National Basketball Association, but that nation is China, so they are, in effect, the Chinese Basketball Association. Which, if they want to be that, fine, but I just don't like all of the phoniness. This is actually the same thing when it comes to Hollywood studios as well. And I've lived abroad, and I've lived abroad in Asia, and it's actually not in China, but I've lived abroad in Asia, and it's very evident in the marketing that Hollywood studios are pretty much only using American actors and labeling them, having stories in America and in English and all of this. It pretty much at this point is only a marketing gimmick. Because when you see the ads, at least in East Asian countries, I'm not sure exactly what it's like in China, but I'm going to assume it's pretty similar. It'll come out with something like the #1 movie in America, just basically broadcasting how popular it is in America. So, I don't think it's, at least with gaming companies, I'm not sure if that's the case, but with Hollywood studios, it's absolutely just a marketing gimmick. And again, in the case of Blizzard, they have pretty much demonstrated that they are a foreign company. And I wouldn't have so much of a problem with this if they were just honest. LeBron James, he says, LeBron James, there was another basketball coach, his last name was Kerr. They're political all the time when it comes to domestic matters, but if you say anything critical about China, then they pretty much lose their minds because they know it's going to hurt their pocketbook. So again, it's just the phoniness all around that I can't stand.